All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Pei Beis, Pei Gimel, or today is Pei Gimel. Yesterday, Pei Beis. So we left off by the top of Pei Beis, Amud Aleph. So just to bring back, because there's going to be a machlokas that we're going to be discussing for the first Amud today. So at the bottom of Pei Aleph Amud Beis, we had a machlokas earlier, which even goes back to Pei Aleph Amud Aleph. So that we brought by Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah says that androgynous can be Michael Truma, can give Truma, even though androgynous is basically a suffix male and female. So some might view it as a Vadai Zachar, and therefore you can go ahead and feed Truma. Where others say no. So Reish Lakish says
he's not a Vadai. He has simonim of both.
Is a halachic Vadai Zachar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And therefore, of course, that's what the androgynous physicality is. But since he can be Michael her Truma, so therefore, right, one would view him, that would be Rabbi Yochanan, because he says you can feed Truma, you could even be Michael Chaz of a Shok. And Reish Lakish says, no, you can't be Michael Chaz of a Shok. And it turns out, so they brought a different machlokas related to that matter. And that was basically in terms of maybe Truma is only Derabanan. Truma is Derabanan. And then we bring we brought another case of
so we're only talking about vegetables. Truma Derabanan.
Even Bisman Azet, even as items that wouldn't, even the other items would only be Truma Derabanan.
Dogan, V'tirosh.
Right. Right. In other words, you don't give it to the Kohen. It's not the same responsibility of giving Truma. But anyway, so to go back. So then we brought this brisa over there of you have a piece of chatas tahara that got mixed with chaticha of chulin, right? So, and there was also another case of lachem panim, but we don't really need to, because it's an identical case. So those cases, those machlokas, that would be considered to be batal, right? But and Rabbi Yehuda argued, but if it was something which was, let's say, truma with chulin, both tahara, it would not be batal. Basically, they say just go sell to a kohen, right? Because a kohen can eat either one, right? Truma tahara or truma or chulin tahara. So we asked over there Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says l'shitaso. He says the reason why he says it's not batal in the first case is because mean b'mino is lo batal, right? So starting off Pei Beis, the second line from the top aval lo nimuach. So we say over there aval lo nimuach mai. So if it was not melted, so one of the terusim were that the reason why it's batal is because it was melted. If it's melted, therefore it's batal. But if it wasn't melted, in other words, it wasn't melted, then so loitala. So then it would not be batal. So the Gemara says, "Adatani about chaticha shel chatas tahara shenis arba b'mei chaticha shel chulin tahara loitala." The sefer, the second case that you said of when you have a chatas tahara, they got mixed with chulin tahara. We say it's not loitala. No, it's not batal. No, it's just go ahead and find a kohen and sell it to a kohen. If you're a kohen yourself, you can go ahead and eat it. Nifluk v'nisna b'didei. So say in the case of a non-melted place, only in our case of the Reisha, right? When we're talking about Tamei and Tahira, right? That's we're only talking about when it's nimucha, when it's melted, that's when it's batal. If aloi nimucha, but when it's not melted, loitala, then it would not go ahead and be batal. So the Gemara answers Taharas, but Taharas adiflei. It's more of a chiddush to say that even in the case of where they're both tahor, then it's not batal. So the Gemara referred to give that case because there's more of a reason to say that it would be batal from a machlokes that's found in Maseches Trumas, right? So between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. So nevertheless, it's more adif to give that teres. Ula Reish Lakish, and according to Reish Lakish, who learned that. Both of them are talking about nimuach, maishna, reishna, maishna, seifa. What's the reishna seifa? So Amar Rav Shishi b'rei Davidi, reisha betumas mashkin derabanan. The reisha where we say it's mevatel, so that is talking about when it's only metame tuma derabanan, and seifa deraisa. And the seifa is talking about deraisa. So mid derabanan, we'll say since it's only right? Tmeya midrabanan. Therefore, it's batal. But in the case of deraisa, it's not batal. About tumas sheretz, mai. So what would you say in the case of tumas sheretz? You'd say mai loisala. Since that's deraisa, right? If it came in contact with the sheretz, then it would not be batal. So why do you bring in the seifa? Right? So adatani seifa about chaticha shachatas, the same question we just heard earlier about chaticha shachatas tahara shenis arba b'mei chaticha shachulin taharas. Right? The seifa says talking about a case of chatas tahara, they have mixed with chulin tahara leisala, that it doesn't go ahead and it's not batal. Niflag v'ledisa b'didei. Why do you go to a separate case of tahara mixed with tahara? Maintain the same case of Tmeya and Tahara and say B'med Varmurim, but Tumas Mashkin only was Tumah Darabanim about Tumas Sheretz, but if it's Tumas Sheretz, low. So once again, the Gemara says Tahara but Tahara is Adifle. No, there's a bigger chiddush to say, and Echnam, you're right, you could have said that, but there's more of a chiddush to say that even if it was Tahara but Tahara, then it is not batal. And Rabba Omar. So Rabba gives his own. He gives his own text. He says, "Rabba Amar Reisha Isser Lav, Seifa Isser Kares." In the Reisha, we're talking about right Tahara b'Tameya. So therefore, Tahara b'Tameya, those cases is an Isser Lav, right? That you can't go ahead and have it. But however, the Seifa was talking about Isser Kachim. Now, it's Kachim to a Zar would not what's it called? Would be Kares over there, right? Isser Kares. So therefore, since it's Isser Kares, that's the reason why it's not batal. But since the Reish is only allowed, so Warren says, wait, how can you say Rabbahu Damar Kol B'Daraisa? If it's Daraisa Loishna Isser Lav Loishna Isser Kares, so it shouldn't make a difference in Bittul. We don't just say, well, since it's only an Isser Lav. Right, so it's only a loisa say it should be batal, right? It's no difference than a kares that it's never batal. So the Gemara says kasha. You're right. In Echanami, it would be a kasha according to Rabba that teres. And Rav Ashi Amar seifa, right? What's the reason why the seifa is not mavatal? B'shum dahavi le davar sheyesh lo matirim. V'chol davar sheyesh matirim afilu be'elef lo batal. Something that can become permissible, right? It has a matir. So such an item is never batal, right? Let's say an egg, a noilat, right? So you just wait till the next day. It's a davar sheish matirim. It's not batal. So to over here, right? You can say that the truma, right? So it's mixed up with the other things. So you say, okay, give it to a kohen. That's the reason why it's not batal when you have something tahira with chulin. Right, or with the chatas tahira with the chulin tahira, right? Just give it to a kohen, he can go ahead and eat it. So Rav Ashi, however, this was Rav Ashi's bedusi. This is a mistake. Why? Solomon, because think about it. If we're talking about a kohen misha shari, then it's already permitted. In other words, a kohen doesn't need. It's not a davar sheish matir to a kohen because he has chatas tahira mixed with chulin tahira. It's all good for him to eat. And Eli Yisrael, right? If it's a Yisrael, then Li'elam Aser, it's always Aser, right? In other words, a Davar Sheish Matirin is not talking about something that, hey, I can't use it, I can give it to somebody else. He's not Matir, it still has the same status, right? I want to finish the parak today, so I apologize about that. Also, I realized that this morning. So, since really a davar sheish matirin is when you change the status of this item, but this item is not changing the status, you're just changing it from a Yisrael to a Kohen. So that's called not the davar sheish matirin. So and therefore we say that what Rav Ashi says is Badusi. Fine, we are around 2/3 of the way down in Pei Beis and Aleph. So one of the points that we touched upon earlier was by Truma Bizman Hazeh, whether it's deraisa or derabbanan. V'savar Rabbi Yochanan Truma Bizman Hazeh deraisa, and does Rabbi Yochanan hold that Truma Bizman Hazeh is deraisa, and that he had to come out to whole teres before of only items that sometimes get counted individually. That's why they're not batal versus a svara to say that, oh, it's only derabanan, right, or deraisa. So he says, no, even if it's deraisa, it's still, right, it's not batal, right? The svara Rabbi Yochanan b'truma zazeh deraisa v'atani l'nebraisa shtei kupos achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. You have two larger boxes. One is filled of chulin, one is filled of truma. Lifneihem, and sitting in front of these two boxes is shtei soin. A smaller box is a saw's worth achas shel chulin v'achas shel truma. Right. Also one of chulin, one of truma. So you have a big box of chulin and truma, one box of large chulin, one box of truma, and then you have small little boxes of chulin and truma. V'naflu elu b'soich elu, and then the saz, they fell inside the larger ones. Harei elu mutar. It's mutar. They are mutar, right? We don't say that, in other words, we say that the chulin fell in the chulin and the truma fell in the truma. Why? Shani Yomer, truma l'zech truma nafla. The chulin b'seich chulin nafla. Because I will say a svara, right? The Gemara is called Shani Yomer, right? Because I will say that the truma fell in the truma, the chulin fell in the chulin, and therefore it's all good. There's no mixtures, there's no combinations, right? A Yisrael can go ahead and eat the chulin. We're not worried that there's truma in there. The Yomer Reish Lakish, however, Reish Lakish add to that, V'hu sharabu chulin ala truma. But however, we'll only say it's mutter in this case if there's more chulin than truma. If there's a rove, right? There's a rove.
The chulin that's mutter desire.
Right.
The whole chiddush.
The question is,
it's not by a Kohen.
right? Because a Kohen can eat either one, right? So we say there must be, even if the truma fell into the chulin, the smaller chulin. So since it would have been a majority chulin, it would be mevatel the smaller amount.
Well, we said that chulin fell into the truma.
The smaller, right, either one. But as long as there's the majority, right, as long as there's a majority of the chulin, it's okay. And Rabbi Yochanan didn't say that. He says even if it's 50-50, it's still okay, right? So he says 50-50 as Rashi points out, right? Right. This there was a Rashi. Maybe the Rashi is later on. So we'll soon see that he was 50-50. Right? That's really important. Rabbi Yochanan. So according to over here, right? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Afal Pishalo Rabbi Chulan Ala Truma, and Rabbi Yochanan would say even if it's at a majority of the chulin on the truma, it would be okay. So bish l'reish lakish savar b'derabanan nami rubiyahu debeina. So this makes sense according to Reish Lakish, right? That it says even if it's derabanan, you still need a rov. El Rabbi Yochanan, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, right? Kasha. It's a kasha because if it's right, if a suffix deraisa, right? Obviously, you can't say, "Oh, a suffix will go l'chua." So it must be that we're even talking about that it's truma derabanan, and he'll go lenient and say, right, that the chulin fell in the chulin and the truma fell in the truma, right? But even if it didn't, right? But even if it didn't, according to Reish Lakish, it's okay because it's a rov. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, he doesn't need the rov. So what's Rabbi Yochanan going to do? El Rabbi Yochanan kasha. So he says, no. Hamani, whose opinion is this? This is the Rabbanan, right? This is the sheet of the Rabbanan here that he's quoting. And I said earlier, right, when we were talking about the case of, right, by the Androginus, right, there over there, that was the first, right, the opening line of the explanation of our Mishnah, right? We says that they can do it. So that what you said in the Mishnah, that even nowadays there is the rice of Anadamic Rabbi Yossi. I was saying like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi holds that's the rice even nowadays. The Tanya, they learn a rice, or the Tanya B'Seder Olam. It talks in Seder Olam, which is a number of brisas. So it says Asher Yoshu V'Secha V'Yishta Yerusha. So it says V'Yirashta. So it says over there, right, V'Yirishta. So it says over there, right, that you will go inherit the land that was inherited. In other words, you're going to inherit the land that was inherited. In other words, it sounds like two inheritances. It was inherited once, went to Galus, inherited again. So therefore, you're going to inherit the land two times. So Rishayna V'Shniya Yesh Lahen, V'Shlishi Same land. Right. So therefore, you're going to go and inherit it a second time. But there is no need to ever go ahead and inherit it a third time because the second inheritance is still in place, even though it was Galus, right? And they were thrown out, right? Ezra came back, right? And they were back in Eretz Yisrael, and then they were after that the Churban Bayis Sheni. Even after that, it still remains. There is no need to inherit it again because we're still in the inheritance phase, and therefore, since we're still in the inheritance phase, it's deraisa. Right, so therefore, Rabbi Yossi, we see Rabbi Yossi holds that Truma B'Zman Hazeh is deraisa. It's Rabbi Yosi. Fine. So 4 lines on top is Savar Rabbi Yechidam v'Derabban and Loy Bein and Rubia. But wait, let's go back for a second. So if you hold that he's going in the shita of the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan held that Shum B'zman Hazeh is only midrabanan, so why does it need a rov in that case? Why do we say that even if the truma fell in the chulin or the chulin vice versa, it would be okay? But now we learn in the Mishnah, mikvah sheyesh bar bimsa l'chubanis. If you have a mikvah that was exactly 40 sa, nasan sa, right? So it's 40 sa of water. Okay. Now nasan sa v'natav sa. So what do you do? You add is 40 sa. You add a 41st, right? Of let's say fruit juice or a non-water, mayim shuvim, whatever, something which is not good for a mikvah, v'natosa, and then I take one out. So now it's exactly back to 40.
Kosher.
So kosher. V'amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, so amar Rabbi Yechon, ad ruba. You can basically go ahead and do it 20 times. Go ahead and do it 20 times. Add, take away, add, take away, add, take away. You always in the order you add first and take away, right? You don't take away because if you take away first, then it's a problem because then it's not kosher. So now, my lab in Ishtaya Rubo. So he says, are we not talking about a case of where that they left in there a rove, right? They left in there a rove, right? Until basically, there's not, in other words, and therefore you can't go ahead and take more of that, right? So you see that even though, it's mayim she'uvim, which is derabanan, nevertheless, you need a rove. So he says, lo, do I nishka rubo? So he says, no, right? So in that case, we're talking about the says, no, we're not saying that you can't have 50-50, right? You can have 50-50. You just can't have more than 50-50. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, he'll explain the case that in a case where it's 50-50, it's okay. You don't need a rove, right? But when you say you don't need a rove, it doesn't mean you need a minority or you can have a minority. It just means it could be 50-50, right? So therefore, in the case we had before, right, when we pointed out that as long as there's more, Rish Lakish says as long as you have more chulin than truma, right, that was b'dafka rov. And when Rabbi Yochanan says you don't need more, he was saying it's not that you need less, but now you can have less, but it has to be 50-50. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, right, it's not that even a minority works, right? It's not batal of a minority, right? Rather, we'll say even if a case is 50-50, then it's okay because it's midrabanan. Or you say or you can say, really, in that case, you need a majority. So why in our case do you not need a majority? Because you have an extra svara of that when you're taking out, right? When you're taking out, or when the boxes fell in, I can say that the truma fell in the truma and the chulin fell in the chulin, and I don't need to come on to rove because each one, the boxes of chulin, right? And therefore, because that's the case of suffik derabanan, so therefore, in the case of suffik derabanan, you can go ahead and rely upon that. Fine.
Even at Yoraisa.
I'm sorry.
Even at Yoraisa, this is Rabbi Yochanan, right?
Right, but over there he was going in the sheet of the Rabbanan. Over there. So it knows that Truma B'zman Hazeh. Yeah, that was in the Rabbanan. Now, so middle of the page, now we go back to Andrigonus. So Tanan, Andrigonus, nice. So now if you look in our Mishnah, right? So the Mishnah on Pei Aleph, Amud Aleph, they have a couple lines, right? So the first line we had in the beginning was Rabbi Yosef Shimon Oimrim, Andrigonus Kohen Shenasa Basisel, Machila B'Truma. He can go ahead and feed her truma, right? Sounds like he marries her, an androgynous, right? You can go ahead and feed truma, all right? Even it's, right, you can go ahead. And then a couple lines later on, it says androgynous nice. Androgynous can go ahead and marry, right? Can go ahead and marry. Now, marry a woman, right? So he say, so it's not androgynous. So he say over here that the androgynous can be nice, which sounds like it's lechatchila, right? Which would mean if you can go ahead and marry her lechatchila, it sounds like he's right. He's a zachar ma'al yahi, right? And therefore, it's a kash Reish Lakish that says, right, you can't go ahead and let's say feed her chazav shok, right? So because he says it's a suffix, So on one hand, Reish Lakish says a suffix, but the Mishnah later on, right, seems to say, nice say, you're going to go ahead and marry L'chachila. If you can marry L'chachila, it's because Androgynous is a man. If he's a man, so then why do you say it's a suffix? So Tani Androgynous nice say. So Tani Imnasa. So it says Imnasa. I have nice say. Tani, it says what do you mean? It says nice say. So he says, oh, I utamech. My aval loy nisas, but what does it mean that a man can't go ahead and marry a androgynous Ella? All right, in other words, they can't marry Ella my nisa. Did he have it? It means that he can't be married. In other words, we don't say now if a man marries a man, you don't need a get, right? That for sure. But if a man marries an androgynous, you have to go ahead and divorce and leave because it's a suffix. So that which we say you can't be married, right? To another man, right, is a suffix, is b'di'evet. So Sota will say, "Nice not b'di'evet." It means he can marry b'di'evet, and not that he can't l'chachila because he's a vadai man. Rather, he's a suffix man. He's more likely to be a man, and therefore b'di'evet. So nice not b'di'evet. So it says, "Nice say l'chachila mashma aval anisa b'di'evet namila." So he says no. So he says no. That which it says nice is l'chachila. But that which is Lainisa is also B'di'evet. So the Gemara says, the Hamiltani Seifa, Rebbe Eliezer, Aimer, Androgynous, Chayav and Alav, Skila Kazachar. If one had relations with an androgynous, he would be Chayiv, Skila, like a Zachar. So therefore, you see, it's a Vadai, a man, Michlal, the Tanakama, and this is only Rebbe Eliezer saying it. So Rebbe Eliezer seemed to be adding or arguing with the Tanakama. Mashma, that the Tanakama earlier holds that it's like more of a suffix. You would not be chayiv skila. So he said no. Really, it's obvious. In other words, it is obvious that he's a man. And as one opinion holds, he can be nice lechatchila, and the other one, because he's such a man, he can go ahead and marry. Androgynous can marry a woman, and the other one, the Rebbe Eliezer also held that he's the man to the point that he'd be chayiv skila if he was with another man, right? And Ikib and I, so if that's the case, what's the nafkamina? I'm very thankful Mayor's not here yet with his son. So Ikib and I, skila mishnei mekaymus, right? So skila mekaymus. In other words, a person who is an androgynous, right? So the person is able to have bia shlo kedarka, and also able to have bia kedarka, right? Because it has both male and female, genitalia, right? So therefore, it's saying very unique halacha, right? That if androgynous is with a man kedarka, that's called Mishkav Zachar. Even though it's not the derech of Mishkav Zachar, since that person is technically a man, so therefore Shnei Makamas means, both Kedarka and Shelo Kedarka would be Chayiv Skila. So the Mar Sabar Chayiv Skila, Mishnei Makamas. So Mar Sabar Kezachar says, no, the only way to be Chayiv, even with an androgynous, right, is only Bia Shelo Kedarka. Bia Kedarka is not considered, according to the other Shita. Bia Kedarka, right? The person is two genders. If it's using the female genitalia to have relations with another man, that's the machlokes. One holds no, that's still called mishkav zachar because he's a zachar, and the one says no, since it's not the derech of a zachar, right? So therefore, it's not called, and therefore you be pater from skil in that case. And the Gemara will explain that machlokes in the next hour. And Amar Rav says, Rav, lesed lemasnisin makme brisa. So we have Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah, right? Rabbi Yossi was the opinion in our Mishnah, right? Of Rabbi Yossi and Shimon Aimrim, right? So Rabbi Yossi and Shimon both said, Androgynous Kohen Shenasa Basisha Machila B'Truma. So over there, Rabbi Yossi, right, said, Androgynous marries and go ahead and feed her Truma, right? He's a man to the point that so much that he can marry allow a Basrel to eat Truma. However, don't pay attention, says Rav, don't pay attention to our Mishnah because there's a brisa of Rabbi Yossi which seems to say different. In other words, basically Rabbi Yossi was chayzer. The Tanya, Rabbi Yossi, Omer, Androgynous.
That's not a brisa, that's a Mishnah at the end of the Bikurim.
Where's his Aleph? Tosefta the Bikurim, it's a Tosefta, I don't know. The Perek Beis. So the Tanya, let's see if anyone knows. It says Tosefta, I don't know. Yeah, the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi, Androgynous, B'rei B'nei Atzmahu. And Androgynous is its own creation, Who? It's not one or the other. It's its own type of gender, right? You see, there's multiple genders, right? They, right? However, right? They're unsure. Im zakar im nekeva. So what do you see over here? Unsure. So if you're unsure, how can you allow a Bas Yisrael to go ahead and eat truma? It must be arguing with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah seems to say, right? Vada, it's a zachar. We consider it a zachar. She can eat truma. Over here, it says the so the Rambam says no. Adarabah, less for lebraisa. Don't pay attention to the brisa. Machmei masisa. Why? Shavkei Rabbi Yosi lebar zuge. Right? Because the fact that that he left out his right. So he says that.
This is the answer, no?
Right. So he says, right. So the fact that he left out his barzuge, right? And in our Mishnah was talking about Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon, right? And over here, so and then we see by the fact that Rabbi Yosi, right, right. So he says, "I listen to Brisa, maybe right." So he says, "I maybe push off the Brisa from the Mishnah." So they know the Brisa is more accurate, right? The Shafke Rabbi Yosi, the barzuge, right? But the fact that Rabbi Yosi left Rabbi Shimon, right? And therefore, you see that he was chayzer. So now, as originally he was with Rabbi Shimon, and therefore, right, because our Mishnah says Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon, and the Brisa only says Rabbi Yosi, so it must be that he left Rabbi Shimon's shita, and this is his new shita. So that was the opinion of Rav. Shmuel Amar lesa lebrisa makmei lemasnisin. Don't pay this brisa of being safek of Rabbi Yosi being masupik in doubt as to what the status of an androgynous is. Don't disregard that because we have our Mishnah. So God says, Adarabah, les lemasnisim makmei brisa. No, maybe you should ignore the Mishnah because the brisa. The hashmin alei l'shmuel, because according to Shmuel, the chayish li'achidai, right? That Shmuel is chayshish for even a yachid, a single opinion versus others when it comes to a chumrah. So in other words, we should follow. Right, the more machmir opinion, right? We should follow the more machmir opinion, and therefore, in other words, not allow her to eat truma. So the Gemara says, "Hani mili kiloi misakra masnisa, avaki misasa makzisa loy chayish." That's only when there's no Mishnah. Then Shmuel is chayshish for even a das yachid to be machmir. However, when you have a a Mishnah which is against the brisa. Even though the Bryce is a machmir opinion, you can still base it on the Mishnah. So Amri Beirav. So he said Beirav. The yeshiva of Rav. As soon as who Beirav is, Mishmei the Rav. Halacha Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon. We'll soon see all these four machlokasim. We're going to bring out this sheet of Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Shimon. Uba androgynous, uba harkava. Right, when it comes to an androgynous, right, which is our case, and harkava, which is a completely different case, talking about grafting, right? Ushmul Amar the kaishi, right, uvikiddush, and Shmuel says the halacha is like Rabbi Yosi when it comes to kaishi, when after attributing different, a woman bleeding after giving birth, and a case of kiddush of also the case of when something when the kilayim to be kiddush or kilayim in terms of right pulling over, we'll soon see vines and stuff like that. The case of kiddush over there. Now, what are these four cases? We'll get into the cases. So androgynous, hadamran. So androgynous is that what you just said. In other words, we says you can be Michael her truma. Harkava. What was the case of harkava? The Tanai was in the Mishnah. A night in vein mevarachin vein markivin erev shvis pacham shashim yai. When it comes to Shemitah, one is not allowed to work his fields. So he can't go ahead and plant or graft or go ahead and put into the ground, right? So all these cases, you can't bend it into the ground during. Well, let's see, right? So it says less than 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. But if he does go ahead and do it within 30 days, then he has to go ahead and uproot it. And Rabbi Yehuda Imer, no. Kol harkava sheina the koletes b'shloisha yamim shuv eina koletes. So he says no. If you go ahead and you graft anything that doesn't basically take after 3 days is nothing. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shimon Oimrim shteish tabasos. No, it takes 2 weeks. And the Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Ravua. So he says, "L'divrei ha'omer shleishim." Even according to the opinion of 30 days, sarich shleishim the shleishim. In other words, if you say it takes 30 days for it to take root, right, for it to start working, then it has to be 30 days before the 30 days, because there's Tosefes Shvis, because you have 30 days before. It's not just at the beginning. So Elul, so it has to be from 30 days before Elul. So it has to be 30 days before the 30 days, which would be Av, right? Right. So in other words, it has to be from there. The Divrei Omer, according to the opinion, it says it takes Shleish. It takes 3 days. So Shleish of a Shleish, you need 33 days before Rosh Hashanah, and the Divrei Omer Shtei Shabbos Shleishim. Therefore, you need also 2 weeks before the 30-day mark. So this machlokes of whether it takes 30 days, 3 days, or 2 weeks, all has to be done. Add on 30 days before that. So in these cases, so this was the case of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon of Harkava, and therefore it is 2 weeks. So 2 weeks. The halach is like him that it's 2 weeks, has to be done approximately, whatever it is, 54 days, right before. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel said halach like Rabbi Yossi b'kaishi the kiddush. So kaishi, the time we learn the Mishnah, kamiye kishua. So how much is, I guess, that we say that the bleeding is attributed to the childbirth, or meir omer, arba'im chamishim yom, or 40 or 50 days. And Rabbi Yehuda omer daya chadasha, right, a month. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon omer ein kushi yosem shtei shabbos. Right now, the kishu any bleeding, right, that will say that the blood is tahira, it can only up to 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that, it will be considered to be the dam would not be attributed to the childbirth. So that was the case of Koshi and Kiddush Titnan. One who goes ahead and he basically bends his grapevines, upon the wheat of his friend. He has now turned that into kilaya kerem, right? He's made kilayim, and he's chayiv b'achrayis divrei meir, and he has to go ahead and repay his friend. His friend had wheat, and now his wheat is useless, right? It's asur b'hana, it's kilaya kerem, and therefore you owe him money for his crops. And Rabbi Yosef Shimon says no. What do they say? What they say is no. Ein adam oiser davar she'eino shalo. So no, a person can't go ahead and aser that which isn't his, and therefore he would not be making kilei kerem because he can't go ahead and make that aser. Fine. Iboilu, top line. So a question was raised. By the way, I had no idea that the Gemara will move quicker, so we could have maybe done the 6:45. So Iboilu, the androgynous Mali. So you say in the case of an androgynous Mali Omar Shmuel, what would Shmuel say? Now, we just had before the Amavei Rav. They said Rav said the halacha by androgynous like Rabbi Yossi, and the halacha was in the other case of not Hakava was Hakava was like Rabbi Yossi, but Shmuel didn't say that was Rav. So what would Rav say? What would Shmuel say regarding the halacha of androgynous? So Tashma, come and listen. The Omar Shmuel. L'Ravanan less lebraisa machil lemasnisa. Oh, well, I have an idea. We can actually go back because Shmuel was the one who argued with Rav and said, right? So when Shmuel said less lebraisa machil lemasnisa, ignore the brisa of where he was suffering what androgynous is and established the Mishnah, right? And established the Mishnah. In other words, the Mishnah says vade fida truma vade a man, and therefore he would hold like Rabbi Yossi in that case. So.
Isn't this the kasha? Because Rav himself said less than last season coming Bryce. Now we're saying possible like Rabbi Yossi and Rishon. Right.
So right. And in this case, so I think the Gemara is gonna. So we'll soon see. That's a good question. Most probably that's the Gemara asks. Right. The Gemara is gonna ask that. Very good. So Gemara says Hakava Mali Amar Shmuel. What would Shmuel say in the other case of Rav? So Tashmak goes and Damar Lei Shmuel Ravan and Tani command Amar Shleisha Shleisha. So he holds like the one who says 3. Right, 3 plus 30. In other words, not 2 weeks plus 30. So 3 plus 30. So obviously, it does not look Rabbi in that case. So Koshi ma Amar Rav. So what would Rav say in the case of Koshi? So Teku, they don't know. There's no hints. We've no other data or information to show us what would Rav say in that case. And Kiddush, what about the case of Kiddush? I mean, Kler Mali Amar Rav. What would Rav say? Some Rabbi Yosef Tashma. Da Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Ein halacha k'Rabbi Yossi. right? So it says over there the halacha is ein halacha Rabbi Yossi. So that was we have to follow this for a second. So that was Rav Huna Amar Rav. That was Rav Huna, the name of Rav. Ein halacha Rabbi Yossi in the case of kiddush. And Amar le'abai my chazitza samachtaha. Why do you rely on that? Samachaha the Amar Rav Adam Rav. So we have Rav Ad, this is the name of Rav, Halach Rabbi Yossi. The halach is like Rabbi Yossi. So he says, Bei Rav man. Who is it? Bei Rav. That is Rav Huna. Rav Huna Amar in halacha, right? So the Bei Rav. So that which we had earlier, right? When it was Amar Bei Rav, right? So that was what we quoted earlier, right? Who quoted the yeshiva of Rav? They were the ones who quoted earlier that.
That's with regard to.
And therefore. So that was the case of kiddush, right? And therefore, as Rav Huna says, ein halacha, right? So going back to your question, right? So I think I saw it earlier, right? So when he said the halacha,
Before it was just
Right.
Rav. So you think,
right? So he says, if you look at Rashi, right? Look at Rashi. It says, "Masnisa b'ami be'Rav, hainu Rav Huna kolotama polig ad amar le'el alib Rav less lamasnisa bar kava." So it's arguing with that statement earlier. So it wasn't direct conflict, and right. So right, I remember I saw it somewhere. Right? So the Rashi there says, right, fine. And Rabbi Yehuda Amar tumtum. So now let's go back. Let's see our Mishnah again, quoting back from our Mishnah on Pei Aleph. All right, Rabbi Yehuda Amar tumtum shenikra v'nimtza zachar lo yichloitz mipnei shukasris. So tumtum, right? So somebody a tumtum who doesn't really show either one of the physical. Right, genitalia, right? It's covered. There's flesh there. We don't know if male or female, and it turns out shenikra, and it tears open some sort of operation. And it turns out these zachar shenatu chalitza because he's like a stris, right? Now remember, a stris is a person who can't have children. He's like a stris, and therefore a person of stris is outside the parsha of yibum chalitza. So this person, a tumtum, is right. So tumtum is basically like a stris. So Amar Rab Ami says, in this case, Amar Rab Ami, my abile Rabbi Yehuda la tumtum daisvi abe korsevik, right? Only sheva banim. We got a little problem because you say it's like a stris. So what about the case? What would Rabbi Yehuda do the case of a tumtum, right? Of biri? I guess that they tore it open, and he had 7 children later on. So Rabbi Yehuda Amarle, so he says Rabbi Yehuda Amarle, Chazal Albana, maybe do it. Maybe you should check with the father first because his Masara is that a tumtum, even you go ahead and you have some sort of operation, to open up the skin or the area, and it turns out he's a zachar, you would still be like a. So Tanya, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, tumtum la yichloitz shema yikra v'nimtza stris. Stris. So a tumtum should not go ahead and do chalitza, because perhaps we'll go ahead and tear open, and it'll turn out that, and if you can't have children, it'll be like a Swiss chama. So atu called the mikra is zachar havi. Well, wait a second. Any tumtum that they cut open is only going to be a male. So Chigomar shema yigra v'nimtza nekeva. Perhaps right, he shouldn't go. Let's say his other brothers, so he shouldn't go ahead and do the chalitza because perhaps what's going to happen. Then she goes off to marry, whatever it is. Perhaps they're going to open up this, the tumtum have operation. It'll be a female, and even if it's a male, Shemayim says stris chama. Perhaps it'll be a stris chama. So we see over here, it's a suffix, right? So over here, it's basically a suffix stris versus that which we stated in our Mishnah. And now this is Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and our Mishnah. Right, was Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda says, "Tumtum shenikra zachar lo yichlot mipnei shukas stris." He is a stris, and over here, suffix might be a stris. So my benayu. So what is the difference between the two? Samarava livsul b'makom achim. Let's say this tumtum does chalitza, and there's other brothers. Now, if you hold the tumtum is vada is stris chama, and therefore that's nothing because the person outside the parsha. Therefore, one of the brothers can even go ahead and do yibum after that. But if you hold it's a suffix, this tumtum might be a male, might be a female. Therefore, none of the brothers can do yibum afterwards, right?
No, but they can do chalitza.
Right. Well, one would have to do chalitza. Right. And I'm going to leave some b'makom achim. Right. Leave some b'makom achim, or b'licha shalom b'makom achim, or not achim. The chalitza shalom b'makom achim. If there's no other brothers, he's only a sibling, right? I'm not going to say brother because it's a suffix. So if you hold it's a suffix. So you got to do chalitza, right? We don't know because you might be a stris, you might not be a stris. But the other one, hold that no. since the person's like a stris, even if he's either as a female or a stris, so therefore outside the parsha of Yibir Chalitza, therefore she's mutalisha. Ika b'nai. That's the Ika b'nai. And Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Abba bar Achmad, Rav Yehuda bar Zivdi, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Andriganus chayav and love skila mishtei mekamos. So Andriganus is chayiv alav shtei mekamos. So we said earlier, Andriganus, right, is this individual that has both male and female genitalia, and therefore, if this person was bayal, right, or someone was bayal this person, either way, whether is shaloi kedarka or kedarka, would be chayav alav skila. Right, would be Semeisve, Rabbi Eliezer, Andriganus chayav and alav skila kibazachar. It says like he be chayiv skila like a zachar, right?
That's only your
So
shalom.
right. So what do you see there, right? So b'medvar murim. So what are we talking about, right? B'medvar murim. The zachar shalom, right? Only right if the be a shalom kedarka. V'benekeva shalom. But if it was kedarka, then pater. So then he's pater. So you see, it's not shtei makomos. There's only one makom echad. It's only if he acts in a way that a male would act. That was b'yishlo kedarka. So Gemara answers, no, who domer ki aytani? You'll say the Tani. We're going to the Brisa Reb Simai Omer Andriganus chayav of shtei skila shtei makomos. So he holds like Rabbi Simai, who holds that Andriganus is chayav skila for shtei makomos, for both makomos, both b'yishlo kedarka and b'yishlo kedarka. So my time, the Rav Simai. What's the reason for it? Simai? So Amar Rava bar Hamduri. Severely, it was explained as Zachar leisishkav mishkave isha. So the pasuk says, right, you should not lie with a male. Mishkave isha, right? Plural. Mishkave isha, right? So Azi Zachar sheish b'shnei mishkavos. Who is a Zachar that has two ways of having relations with? Havi Omer is androgynous. That's an androgynous. So you see over there that androgynous is chayiv shtei mekaymas. Rabban and the Rabban who argue and say only b'derech Zachris, right? Rabban and Afagav these beishnei mishkavos as Zachar ksiv. It says as Zachar, no, as Zachar the male. Rabban and Zachar greda minole. So minole. So if that's the case of the pasuk, where do they know that a regular Zachar, not an androgynous Zachar? Says so the Bach over here changed it. Says may v'es, right? From v'es, right, comes to include. Even a zachar, so a zachar, a regular zachar, or even an androgynous, just derech zachris, those are both chayiv skila for mishkav zachar. And be'isha shalo kedarka. Now, what about an isha, right? A woman, a person has a rayas, she's an eshes ish or some other relation, right? And also to have relations with her. So how do we know? We know that bia kedarka, right, is the normal way of bia. How do we know bia shalo kedarka is considered to be a bia? So V'isha shalo kedarka menelahu. So V'isha, it says V'isha, right? No, I think it changes it. It's a Isha. Where's the Bach? No, I think he covers this one. Rabbanan Zachar Greda Menale me the S and Isha Shalakadarka Menale me Isha, right? It says right, there's no va from Isha, right? So it says Isha, so therefore an Isha, since there's Isha in this pasuk, and this pasuk is about Mishkav Zachar, so Mishkav Zachar is also considered to be Bia when it comes to a woman. So that any time when the Torah answers Bia between a man and a woman, it not only Bia Kadarka, but even Bia Shaloi Kadarka. And Amarav Shizi Amarav Chiza Lo Lekol Amarav Eliezer Andriganus Zachar Malihu. Shimata Merkade, yeah. So he says not for everything, right? So not for everything that we say that the androgynous is considered to be right, like a zachar malia. In other words, we asked to hear a chayiv skila, but not everything in androgynous is considered to be a male, right? Shimata Merkade, because if you say that b'mukdashin yakish, right? Because then they would be able to be makdish items, right? To offer, right? And we'll soon see. So what's the issue with that? We talked the Agdish, and where do we see that they cannot go ahead and basically be makdish an item? The Tana Rabbanan, Hanirva, you have a bird, right? There was nirva, there was satanized or amuksa, or it was set aside for avodas kochavim, benevet or worship, the esnan, or it was exchanged with the zona, or mechir, or sold for a dog, the tumtum, the androgynous. Or if this is a bird, right? It was a tumtum or an androgynous. In other words, you want to say before that androgynous is male, right? So maybe it's a male bird, right? So or a tumtum and androgynous, matamin begadim, abesabliya. So all these items, right? They're even so all these items are no good for a carbon. And if he does go ahead and do malik on them, so even though these were kosher animals, right? So we don't treat them. So now they're puzzled. They're not good to go ahead and be offered, right? And according to the Tanakama, right, they're matam begadim abeis abliya, right? Just like an animal that was a kosher animal, right? That was shech. It was a shech, but it was a treifa. So it's not matame, right? The bird itself, the carcass itself is not matame. It's only matame beis abliya. If a person eats it, then he's matame his body, but not by touching it. And Rabbi Eliezer, Omer. No, they are not matame beis abliya. Why? Anytime that it says, let's say they're offering zachar and keva, tuntum andrignus mibenehem, right? Then you exclude tuntum andrignus from them. The oath, but however it comes to a bird, right? But it doesn't say by bird offerings, a male bird or a female bird. So therefore, so therefore, you don't go ahead and disqualified for that. So you see over there, according to Rebbe Eliezer, right? He does not go ahead and consider an androgynous, right, like a zachar when it comes to offerings. And Amarav Nachum Bar Yitzchak Af Anam Tanina, we also learn Rebbe Eliezer Aimer says Rebbe Eliezer, right? Hakilayim, right? Just in time for singing, right? Hakilayim, Hakilayim Utreifa V'Yaitse Dofen. So an animal, right? That was kilayim. It came from two different species, or it was a treifa, v'yaitze dofen, or it was born right through a C-section. Right, tumtum ve'andrignus lo kedoshin v'lo makdishin. Right, they can't be sanctified and makdishin. Ramar Shmuel, what does it mean? Lo kedoshin b'tmura. Right, in other words, they don't become kadosh if the one doesn't exchange with them, one doesn't tamura with them, lo makdishim v'yaitze tamura, or if it makes something else a tamura, both of them don't allow others to become kadosh. Shema mina, that we see that tuntum andrignus is a different type of animal. It's not considered to be a zachar. So only andrignus is considered a zachar when it comes to humans, but when it comes to karbonos, then the andrignus is not considered to be a zachar. And finally, Rabbi Yezer, Satanya, Amar Rebbe, so he says, Amar Rebbe, Kshalachti Lilmod Torah Eitzer Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, when I went to go ahead and to learn by Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, Chavru Alai Talmidenu Ketarnagolim Shel Beis Bukia, right? So they attacked me like, I guess, like the roosters or the chickens, right? And the Beis Bukia, I guess, when you bring in an outside bird, the others, they don't like outsiders. They didn't allow me to learn. They kept pecking at me. I only learned one halach in that Mishnah, which was Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, androgynous chayav skila kazachar. That androgynous is chayav skila kazachar. That was the only halacha I learned, right, in that case, because basically until they threw me out of that chabura. So Hajar Allah, Arel, we finish Arel. So tomorrow 7:00.